Sarah Winchester wanted to build a home, a sanctuary, from the demons that haunted her after the deaths of her infant daughter and her husband. So she began obsessively building, hiring carpenters to work in shifts around the clock, day in and day out, never stopping until the day she died. Her original 8-room home grew and grew continuously and haphazardly for 38 years, until she had a sprawling palace that covered 6 acres with 160 rooms, 47 staircases, 2,000 doors, and 10,000 windows. The Winchester Mystery House, as it's now known, still stands in California, an outlandish tourist attraction. Have you ever been there? I haven't. But Rabbi Rubenstein, when he lived in California, had a chance to visit it, and he told me about it. He said, "The Winchester House has a frantic energy about it. You go from room to another room that leads to another room with no sense of purpose. You have staircases that go up just to go right back down. You get sucked into the house and feel lost." Sarah Winchester had managed to outbuild Herod the Great with her sprawling palace, but one thing was clear: it was no sanctuary. Sarah Winchester was productive, and she built and built, but she never stopped to reflect on the purpose of her building. She never ceased building long enough to actually enjoy being present in what she had created. If you can believe it, Sarah Winchester built for 38 years and she had no architect. Surely, if she'd had a blueprint, perhaps she would have been able to build the sanctuary she really wanted, rather than the overgrown monstrosity that she constructed. Now, don't worry. This is not a sermon criticizing the real estate industry. I know better than to give that sermon in this crowd. And I'm sure you hear that story and you are certain you would never build your house that way, the way Sarah Winchester did. And yet more and more, the Winchester house reflects the way we build our lives. Every day, relentlessly, daily, building and constructing and renovating and improving our careers, our bodies, our minds. Now, this is a room full of high-achieving Type A New Yorkers. I'm not going to ask you to stop doing all of those things. You should build your careers, train for your triathlons. You should take classes and expand your mind. These things are good. They are essential. I'm not asking you to stop building. But if you do not have an architect for your time, if you never stop to reflect on the ultimate purpose of all that building, you end up building a life without a soul. In order to be an architect of your time, the first thing you have to do is to reclaim the Jewish understanding of time. Because today, we've lost sight of that. Now we think of time in terms of productivity, accomplishment, rungs on the ladder, notches on the belt. We ask, are we using our time well? Will this contribute to my resume, my self-fulfillment plan? At least since the time of Isaac Newton, who articulated a scientific understanding of time, we've been increasingly quantifying it, measuring it, and dividing it down to the billable minute. Benjamin Franklin coined the familiar phrase, "Time is money." And we have been trying our best to convert our time into profit ever since. But Judaism, it does not judge time this way. It's refreshingly countercultural. Judaism views time in one of two distinct categories. Time is either kodesh or hol, sacred or profane. In profane time, you go to your jobs, you do the dishes, you tone your triceps, you go do volunteer work. You are encouraged to busy yourself with all those productive things that build a life, that allow you and your family to be fed and sustained and healthy and constantly growing. But Zman Kodesh, sacred time, like this Rosh HaShanah morning when we gather in this sanctuary to celebrate the new year, sacred time is something completely different. I think you feel it already in the elevated energy that we feel in this room as you've come and gathered, each of you in your assigned seating zip codes with family and familiar friends. You feel it in the beloved leadership of our senior rabbi, Peter Rubenstein, who so powerfully began our holiday with his sermon last night. You feel it in the music washing over you and the timeless liturgy. Sacred time gives us an opportunity to stop building and for a moment instead to dwell, to be fully present. Sacred time encourages you to see yourself and the world around you as whole. How do you design your time? Do you have a blueprint for holiness? In fact, you do. We do. We call it Shabbat. Shabbat is our ancestors' radical, brilliant innovation that we brought to the history of humanity. This understanding that human beings were not meant to every single day work and create and build without ceasing. Shabbat is our sanctuary in time. How did our tradition come to this wisdom of Shabbat? It originates in the very first chapters of our sacred text, the very beginning of the Torah, a creation story that we recall on this Rosh Hashanah morning, the birthday of the world. The Torah recounts how in 6 days, God created the entire world, the lights in the heavens, and the mountains, and the oceans, the beasts of the fields, grasses, trees, plants, and then finally human beings. Creating the whole world in 6 days, God was certainly a type A overachiever as well. Perhaps a New Yorker. But it says in the Torah that on the 7th day, God stopped from all the labor and rested. Now, I can guess why mortals would need a Shabbat. But it's rather a mystery to me why God would need Shabbat. Doesn't God have unlimited power and unlimited energy? Could it be that God gets tired? The Vilna Gaon, an 18th century rabbi and scholar, offered this explanation for the mystery around God's first Shabbat. He said, God stopped to show us that what we create is meaningful only when we stop creating it and start remembering why it was worth creating in the first place. It seems that even God needs to stop to remember the point of it all. God not only stopped working on the 7th day, but it says, the Torah says, that God blessed the day and made it holy. The first time that the word holy is ever used in the Torah is not in relationship to human beings. The first thing that God sanctifies is time. And God commanded you created in God's image, to do the same thing. The fourth commandment out of our top 10 commandments, inscribed right above my head, says, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho. Keep the Sabbath and make it holy. Making holy or sacred time doesn't just happen. We have to make it happen. Ironically, creating rest takes purposeful action, an active release from all the hammering and the sawing and the noise and the competition, all the desire for more stuff, like cell phones, over the basic human need for more meaning. So here is the blueprint our tradition has given us. Build and create and renovate and improve your lives for 6 days a week. But then, one day a week, or if that's too intimidating or scary, start with Friday evening. Make a true Shabbat. Be the architect of your days and create your sanctuary in time. Now you might be thinking, even if I had the time for sacred time, I don't know how to do that. I'm not particularly observant or religious. Remember what synagogue I'm in here. But the fact is, I think all of you already have experience with creating sacred space in your lives. What time is sacred to you? Time that you're willing to schedule your life around no matter what the inconvenience. Is it your Sunday tea time? Or a great yoga class? I know some of you are thinking therapy. I've heard many parents, especially of young children, describe bedtime as a sacred time. It's often highly ritualized and a very precious moment in the day. Which is why I was particularly surprised and discouraged when I saw this book on Amazon entitled 1 Minute Bedtime Stories. This brilliant volume had condensed each beloved bedtime classic to just 1 minute. I was even more disturbed to see that the series included the title 1 Minute Bible Stories. Now, if we are only judging time in terms of productivity, then it certainly is efficient. But if we're looking at this through the lens of Jewish time, we've taken a sacred moment and completely forgotten the purpose. A congregant recently shared a story with me that brought this point home. She was putting her young son to bed with all of the ritual that she loved, first giving him a nice bath, and then putting him in his PJs, brushing his teeth, and then a book. But this night, as she crawled into bed with him, he took the book out of her hand and put it on the floor. He just snuggled up against her, nuzzled his head in her shoulder, and then looked up at her and said, "Mom, this is the point of life." I think you've experienced time like this, where you sense this is the point of life. Those moments when you're not reaching for anything else, when you feel like there's absolutely nothing missing. Those moments when you feel so satisfied, so fully present. The moment feels self-contained and timeless, perfect and whole. You don't have to believe in God to know that those are sacred moments. But it would be pointless and naive for us to go through our lives just waiting and hoping for those sacred moments to happen. Don't wait for a vacation or a holiday to make sacred time. Be the architect of your time and take our tradition's blueprint and make Shabbat, which is true sacred time, a habit in your life. Now, Jacob and I, we didn't grow up, like many of you, with Shabbat as a habit in our lives. We both grew up in Jewish homes that would observe Shabbat by often lighting candles, and sometimes we went to services. But I can't say that the day felt particularly set apart. We didn't really feel like Shabbat was sacred time. So a few years ago, Jacob and I decided to rethink our Shabbat practice from the way we had known it growing up. We recognized that the primary threats to our Shabbat environment, like probably yours, were electronic. So we created a boundary. No television, computers, or phones for 24 hours. Importantly, we didn't make this a suggestion. We made it a command for the kids and for us. And like so many rules that restrict behavior and create boundaries, we actually found this immensely liberating. Rest without guilt. We did not have the option to multitask the day away, to check in with our emails, to check in with the headlines. Imagine this, single tasking, where you are fully present in the one thing you're doing. We had no option but to dwell in our sanctuary of time. So we embraced long Shabbat lunches with friends that lasted until the sun went down. We watched our unplugged children find the simpler joys of a card game or disorganized sports. We embraced idleness and the Shabbos shluff, the Shabbos nap. We made time for reading and conversation and walks that had no destination. All those things that knit us together as families and friends and communities, all those things that remind us of the point of life. What would it look like if this entire congregation, what would it look like if the entire city or the whole country took a Shabbos rest every week? Can you imagine what it would be like if we all rested together? Now, there was a time when Sunday blue laws were enacted in this country just to legislate this kind of communal Sabbath observance. Nowadays, we think of blue laws as an annoyance when we want to buy liquor on a Sunday. Now, I'm not advocating for bringing down the wall of church and state. I think it should stay up. But I empathize with the society's desire to decree rest for all its citizens, no matter what class or station. For it's been shown that commanding rest, communal rest, is not just good for us as individuals, but for binding societies together. The cultural Zionist Ahad Ha'am once famously said, "More than Israel has kept the Sabbath has kept Israel." What if we all kept the Sabbath? How would the Sabbath then keep us more connected, more whole, more present? In some ways, I envy more traditional Jews, more traditionally observant Jews, who feel fully commanded to set aside sacred time. The fourth commandment says, keep the Sabbath and make it holy, and for them, that's all they need to hear. It is so much harder for us as liberal Jews who so value our personal autonomy. We want to choose and only follow those commandments that are personally meaningful and morally relevant. But as Reformed Jews, if what we are doing is determining which mitzvot are still meaningful for our 21st century lives, then the commandment to keep Shabbat is more relevant than ever before. Is there anything more fundamentally important than how we design our time? What is it? Abraham Joshua Heschel, in his seminal book, The Sabbath, said, "We can only solve the problem of time through the sanctification of time." What is at stake here in solving our problem of time? It's not just our sanity. It's our very humanity. Sarah Winchester lost her humanity in the relentless daily building of that house. She forgot the purpose for why she was building. She did not know how to ever dwell or be present in a moment. She did not know how to sanctify her time. But Judaism does not allow you to build your life this way. It commands you, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho, keep the Sabbath and make it holy. Take our tradition's blueprint to build a life sanctified in time and rich in meaning. In this new year, 5774, redesign your holy time. It is the point of life.